welcome everyone to our Pro Talk show today, sponsored by Chartered Buying, and I'm your host, Faik. We would request all our audience to kindly share where they are from, where they have joined, and help us learn, so we try to be a little bit more relevant in our today's discussion. Last time we were in Dubai, then we moved to London, and today we are in Seattle, Washington to cover this exciting session. I am excited to be joined by a highly accomplished contracts negotiation expert who has worked in leading organizations and transformed the contracts function, Miss jeanettenyden. Welcome, Janet, to the show today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. So a quick snapshot, she is a licensed professional and a practice law professional in Washington with more than 20 years of experience drafting and negotiating a variety of agreements. I find it, trust me, when I engage in contracts, procurement contracts, I find it quite challenging. So it's very exciting for us to learn in today's session. She's also an author, educator, and a business consultant. She has helped a lot of non-lawyers to solve the contracts drafts and delivering best-in-class turnkey solutions. Having authored so many books, total 4 books, and quickly run through the negotiation rules, the vested outsourcing model, getting to be the negotiating agreements, and the contracts professional playbook. Notable white papers across the board with theories and unpacking pricing models. There is a lot that we are definitely going to explore in today's discussion. Welcome, Janet, and we are happy to have you. Looking forward to the discussion today. Over to you, if you can help us a little bit about your background.
Yes, so as you mentioned, I am an attorney in the United States and for 30 years, and 20 years ago, I started teaching non-lawyers how to negotiate contracts, and my career has just really taken off from there, as you mentioned, with white papers and books. And people ask me why I would want to leave the practice of law to start my own company. And it's really because non-lawyers, particularly in the United States, are doing the work that lawyers used to do a generation ago, but they don't realize it. So my entire career is helping those non-lawyers get the training and the skills that they don't have, but that they need to be able to do their job well. So I'm always so thrilled when I get brought into a company and I can work with a team and give them the tools and the tips and resources so they can be successful.
Thank you for sharing those updates. A quick message for all our viewers to please keep those messages coming in. I'll quickly reflect. Sid Damija has joined us from Dubai. We have Visal. Hello, Visal. Hello, Sid. And everyone who has joined in. Mohammed Mukhtar. Sharif from Egypt. Oh, great. We have a lot of people joining in from across the globe. Yaqub from UAE. And we have Imtiaz and Yuvo Dukunda from, she's not mentioned the location. We welcome all of you. And we are looking forward to the exciting discussion. One of the favorite discussions that I go into, also a bit challenging. So moving on, can you help us learn a bit on Janet about what procurement is in US and what are the skills required, the qualities required that a person who wants to move to US from across the globe should actually focus on. So what are those qualities and skills that any youngster, college pass out, or maybe an experienced professional, 5, 10, 20 years experience wants to move to US should focus on so that they are ready before they actually reach the ground?
Yes, so the big skill set that I see, and so take this with a grain of salt because I don't see everything in procurement, is really around human communication. Being able to talk to people who are your peer, and then being able to present ideas to people who you report to or others in the organization from other departments who are senior to yourself. Because learning how to work with Ariba or Oracle or any of these other SAP, we can teach you how to do that. That's more easy, how to toggle and click and do what you need to do to manipulate those programs to generate POs or DocuSign or other things like that. What people are really struggling with as baby boomers in the United States, those born right after World War II, leave their management positions and new people are coming in, is how do we communicate complicated issues? How do we bring people together into a committee setting and reach a decision when we are not the boss? So procurement's usually never the authority. We are one voice in the United States of many. So if you understand how to work within the U.S. culture, if you understand how to communicate very well with people who are like you and people who are senior to you and people who are in other departments, then you will be very successful in the United States, because we can train you how to do lots of other things. The other thing is that with companies that still do category buying, it's very important to understand your category and the depth and understanding of how the supply chain has changed post-COVID within your category. Now, not all companies have category type management anymore, but those that do are finding they really need the talent to understand it.
Okay, great. So a few people have sent out a message. We have Shoaib from Dubai, who is a managing director for one of the leading marketplace. We have Missoum from Algeria and Manish. Hi, Manish. Hi, everyone. We have Mohammed Refai from Qatar, Yasser from US, and Yasser Ismail from Dubai. Welcome, everyone. You can write down your questions, any clarifications that you have, and we will request our valued host guest to share the response on that. So moving on further, are all contracts, so if I look at the experience in procurement, are all contracts based on tenders, or is it that there could be different scenarios? So help us a little bit on reaching out to a contract stage.
Yes, so no, not all contracts are a result of a tender. And in the United States, they are called requests. So we can have a request for a quote. We can have a request for a proposal. We could have a request for a solution. So we have different types of requests. We don't call them tenders in the United States. In the federal government, in state governments, because we have 50 different states within the US, and then loads of municipalities that are all governments, so cities, counties. A lot of those purchases at a certain financial or risk threshold are started with a request for quote or request for proposal first before a contract is issued. In the commercial sector, we can purchase without a request for quote or a request for purchase under certain circumstances, and we can gather the information and issue a contract without what you would call a tender.
Okay, sounds good. So we have one question from Sharif, who's mentioning that yes, number one skill is communication. Yes, no doubt about it. And the one thing AI can't help with is communication and empathy, right? Absolutely. So do you connect anywhere on the contracts front, the AI, the chat GPT kind of support? So Janet, if you can give us a little bit on the contracts front connected with chat GPT?
We do not currently have anything that's connected with chat GPT. In the United States, contract language has to be written by an attorney. And if a non-attorney, such as a procurement person, touches contractual language, that all has to be reviewed by an attorney in the United States. So I don't think that chat GPT in the United States is going to be quickly adopted until we can understand the role of lawyers and legal oversight within contracts, because they are legally binding agreements with lots of consequences to them if something goes wrong. Where I see ChatGPT and things perhaps playing a role, although not today, but in the future, might be in all of the communication that goes out with requests. So request for quotes, request for proposals, or requests for solution. So that sort of generated template kind of introductory email. Hello, Fake, we are going to issue a request for proposal. Is your organization interested? Hello, Fake, thank you. We received your interest in the proposal. We need your company's qualifications. Fill out this spreadsheet online. Hello, thank you. We've received it. A lot of that probably can be automated, which in some organizations is done by an individual or an individual uploading a template into a system. I think that automating a lot of that communication might be the first place, but not today in the contracts themselves. I think we are a few years out before we will see that take shape.
Okay, moving on. So one of the points which usually we practice in the country, and based on the experience that we have done, that the contracts are signed by the signing authorities within the organization. But in some places we have also come across, are those contracts notarized? So if we take an example of property contracts, if we take other examples, unlike procurement contracts which are by signing authority. So help us know a little bit about how things are in US. Are all contracts notarized? What is the ratio that you can on a high level share on the notarized versus the signing authority?
So commercial contracts in the United States go according to signing authority. And there is a provision in contracts that say that the person who is signing on behalf of the organization has the authority to sign and obligate the organization. Now, in real estate transactions in the United States and leases in the United States, some family court matters around divorce or child support for children, things like that, different municipalities will have different rules about notarization, but not in commercial contracts throughout the United States as a uniform rule. We do not have to have a notary sign that they have witnessed that the person who is signing has the appropriate authority to sign.
Okay, thanks for clarifying, because the rest of the part of the world compared to US, we usually feel that the norms are quite stringent in US. So I think that's a good clarity and a sign of relief for all procurement professionals that we can manage the contracts internally. So thank you for that. So a few people have mentioned, so one is, we have Munaf mentioning that he has already searched on ChatGPT and it just highlights the points and clauses. It doesn't tell you what actual clauses. So definitely there's a long way to go. And Misum has a good feedback. Thank you, Misum, for the feedback. We definitely want to learn, hear the feedback, and continuously want to improve and bring the best information going forward. Thank you, Shoaib. And so one of the points that we have here is non-lawyers have particular trouble quantifying the limitation of liability. Oh, that's a very good question. And limitation of liability clause, the indemnity clause is one of the most troubled clause that I have come across. And then the situation goes to the legal team for reviews, and both legals come into place to have those dialogues around. So over to you, Janet. Help us a little bit on the limited liability, how the procurement professionals can make it a bit easy on this front.
I do. I actually have a fabulous solution, and that is understand the risk. So lawyers write, and I just got done writing template contracts for one of my clients. When we write a template contract, we take a snapshot in time, like with the camera, and we freeze frame the risk in that moment, and then we make our best decisions about what the risk is to determine what the indemnification should be and what the limitations of the liability should a risk event happens. A procurement person, though, is living in real time. So I was updating templates that were written well before COVID. And you can do a risk profile that will help you understand what the indemnification should be and what the limitations of liability should be. And I actually teach a class on how to de-risk your contract that you get the class and coaching with me if you're interested. So it's something that can be taught, how to identify, analyze, and then manage the risk so we understand what the limitations are. And once we understand, what the risks are, when we understand the risks, then we can appropriately assign the limitations of the liability.
That makes it very, very clear. Thank you very much, Janet, for that. We have a lot of questions. Maybe in the interest of time, we might find it difficult, but let's take a few questions there in the chat box, which is, how can you effectively control contract expenditure, which is one of the favorite subjects for procurement professionals, minimize leakage, and ensure clear communication within the organization throughout contract implementation? Thank you very much, Yasser, for that question. It's an interesting point. So I would request Janet to help us and make it a little bit clarifying and understandable for us.
So we have to start at the beginning, and we have to understand what the work is that that particular supplier or vendor or service provider is going to be providing. That's why we have value leakage, is we don't understand what they can do and what they cannot do. And then a risk event happens, and then we experience losses. Not enough to go to court and have an indemnification or liability conversation, but enough that something happens and we don't get the full value from the relationship. A deadline is missed. An end user customer is upset or is lost if they're external to the company because of this problem that we're having with a particular supplier. And I know that many of you work for suppliers who work for very large organizations, and you know how this happens. And you show up in a meeting and we thought you did that. So it was not in the contract. We never discussed it. It wasn't part of the tender. We really have to get very disciplined in procurement and working with subject matter experts to understand the work of the suppliers and the vendors, and to be very clear that we've outlined it all. That's the number one way to prevent value leakage and to get coordination with stakeholders. Unfortunately, not all procurement people are seen as adding value to that conversation. So we have to go back to communication. AI and GPT cannot do this for us. We have to establish our expertise and authority as procurement professionals and ask valuable questions and stand up for why we're asking these valuable questions, but without confronting. We need to understand this. And I did this yesterday with a team member who's, you're making this too difficult. This is too, you're blowing this out of proportion. No, actually I'm not. And I was able to manage that conversation to get the information I needed to write the contract, because what I was asking for was valuable. And just because she didn't see the value in my questions doesn't mean that I don't ask those questions. And we really need, as a procurement function, to own that we ask good qualifying questions, and we don't just throw an email to somebody and say, well, what do you think? Because they're not going to give us good answers.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Mohammed has a question. In case of conflict between US supplier and a foreign entity, which legal entities will be eligible to solve the issue?
Okay, so it's called a jurisdiction and venue clause in your contract, or governing law clause. So I've seen them labeled three ways: governing law, jurisdiction, venue. Venue is very specific to the US market. What you're looking for is, what is the controlling law And within the controlling law, what is the controlling territory? Now, for international agreements, some organizations call on the ICC, the International Commercial Court, I believe I forget, I always just think of it as the ICC, for arbitration. But that is still done in an English-speaking language if you're working with a United States company, and you're likely going to do it within the United States, but it'll still be an international organization for arbitration, and that arbitration would then be binding on the commercial agreement. So you're either going to be in the United States Court of Law or you're going to be in the ICC doing binding arbitration, are the two that I see the most.
Sounds good. So that clarifies, I think one of the points is on the flip side. So this question is from Shoaib. How adept are the lawyers? And I think, Janet, you being a perfect person to answer this question, how adept are the lawyers in understanding the business side to enable them to design a suitable contract? Because sometimes there is a catchy situation where lawyers say that, okay, this clause is extremely important, whereas the business feels that it may not have too much of a relevance. So help us understand a little bit on this.
The United States is shifting a lot, and companies are not investing in commercial contracts attorneys the way they did a generation ago. And the attorneys that I'm working with do not understand commercial business. So I would not at all be surprised if there are lawyers that do not understand business, but understand the law very, very well. And that's where your role as a procurement professional to speak on behalf of the business owner and find the middle ground and educate the lawyer. I had a woman who'd been practicing for 40 years before she retired really learn a lot from me as she and I were developing a bespoke contract. And as a result of our working together, she learned a lot about the business she didn't understand. And then I learned a lot about how that legal department operated. So it takes that kind of relationship to be able to inform an attorney and allow them to see the risk from the business perspectives, to explain the services or the purchases of goods and how it will impact that organization. Otherwise, they are so busy, they're just going to give you a standard answer from a textbook or from a case law in the United States, and they're not going to understand until you take the time to explain it to them.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions today, but it will be difficult. But we really appreciate Yasser for raising your question, Mohammed. Then we have an anonymous LinkedIn user. Then Jamal is there. Thank you all for your questions. Before we move on to our rapid fire, which is we'll try to cover up in next 2 to 3 minutes. What is the most important clause that you consider in US at the moment?
So the lawyers consider indemnification and the limitations on liability the most important, because once the risk event happens, we have to understand who's responsible for the losses. So we're at the very end when something blows up, and now we have to solve it. So that's why a lawyer believes those two are the most important clauses, typically.
Interesting. And are we paying, as procurement professionals, are we paying attention to the most negotiated clauses?
Unfortunately, the most negotiated clauses are indemnification and liability, but procurement should be focusing on the scope of services and the technical specification to make sure that that is complete, absolutely complete, because then you don't need an indemnification clause and liability clause nearly as much when we have our scope of work and our technical specifications complete.
Okay, and the last point is, how did you pitch into the contracts domain?
So a gentleman who owned a business had to pay money, not his fault, but that was what the U.S. law had for him. And I negotiated a deal fairly quickly for him and his company, and he said something to me to the effect of, well, if you could teach my sales team to negotiate as well as you do. And I thought, oh, a star is born. I don't have to practice law. I can teach people how to negotiate contracts. And 20 years later, here I am with 6 training programs and coaching and mentoring and working with legal teams to develop video playbooks to negotiate contract terms. So I'm thrilled that he planted that seed in my mind.
Wow, that's an exciting story and a bit of an interesting front in reaching the contracts domain. We really appreciate you taking time today for us. It's quite early in your place, but you took time to come forward and share such a lot of wisdom today, because we tend to search a lot of things, but we don't have first-hand information from the experts of what is happening in different parts of the world. So helping us a lot of best practices on how things are progressing in US. So that was very informative. Thank you really, Jeanette, for joining us. Thank you to all the viewers who have joined in today and spent their time coming up with such exciting questions. We are looking forward in future bringing in a lot of exciting stories, a lot of exciting subjects on procurement, related to procurement, what is latest happening in procurement, what are the best training services that are there in procurement, and the technologies which is we are all talking about. So we are looking forward. Thank you very much once again to everyone who has joined in. Thank you, Janet. Let's look forward to join in the next session. Until then, goodbye.